How's it going, everybody? Back in the saw shop. Had an awesome day yesterday. As you guys know, I have a 19-month-old daughter and Miss Charlie, and I am loving our family outings. We do some pretty epic family excursions on Saturdays, and we went to the Manitoba Museum yesterday, and I don't know about you guys, but I love me a good diorama, and that place is full of them. I don't know what it is, and they're the same ones that have been there since like 1964, but it's my childhood, friends. And what's happening is I'm experiencing my childhood through my daughter's eyes. All these places we're taking her, and places I haven't been to in 20, 30 years in some cases. And you go there and it's exactly the same, and it's like reliving your childhood. So it's been a lot of fun. Anyways, friends, long story short, we got home last night, put the baby to bed, we're winding down. It's about 9 o'clock, and I ran out to the power saw shop. I was out here till 1 a.m., 2 a.m., just measuring and deciding what I want to do with this 394. Now, you guys remember in the last video, I checked the Squish with these calipers. And these calipers are rubbish. They're ones I don't mind leaving in the shop. They can get cold. They're plastic, so they don't rust or anything. But today's video, I adjusted the Squish on this saw and did machine work to the cylinder. And I decided I'm going to use the 394 Meteor piston with a single ring. We are going to lighten it. We are going to flow the windows. A lot of the same work I did in the 288 clone saw. That saw turned out to be rubbish. In fact, coming soon, I'm going to decommission that saw. I want to take the cylinder piston and the pipe off that saw and mount it to an OEM 281 that I have. A good running 281, and run that combo on that saw, because that saw was a monster, but the chassis, the oiler, the ignition, the chain brake, you guys know how I feel about Farmer Tech saws, so I won't get back into that. Anyways, so today's video, you're doing machine work and you're picking your Squish number. Let's talk about Squish, what I did to this saw, and where I'm going. I like to show you guys my thought process, whether it's right or wrong. I always show it because this is what we do when we're deciding what to do to build a saw. My build parameter for this saw is occasional use. Doesn't have to be an absolute torque monster, although I'd like it to pull a 3-foot bar if necessary. Although that kind of cutting in this region is few and far between. So I wanted to make this a nasty, super fast, crazy bucking saw that when I got a lot of wood to buck, I can pull this saw out and just absolutely murder wood. We'll see if I can do that once it's running. Anyhow, I'll bring you guys in. I dropped the cylinder. So now what do we have to do? I gotta check my Squish and make sure it's in the parameters that I set. And as we measure it, I'll tell you guys my thought process. So check the Squish. And then also, we have to retime this, because if I drop the cylinder, guess what? I lowered my exhaust roof, my transfers, and lowered my intake floor. So what does that do? Well, my exhaust opens lower, my transfers open lower, and on the way up, my intake opens sooner. Those are all positives for this build. And also, because I cut the Squish band a little bit, I also should bump my compression up. Now, if I left this saw stock, I would have a saw with more compression. And as I stated in my last video, I think these make enough compression. They don't have a huge combustion chamber, and that's a lot of piston moving up and down in there, moving air. So if I upped my compression and I want to raise the exhaust, if I raise the exhaust, I should be at about stock compression with this saw and just have an absolute nut saw. Or it'll blow up. Anyhow, I'll bring you guys in and let's get rocking and rolling.
She cuts, eh?
we're going to do today. We're going to check the squish, see if it's about where I want it. Now, there may be some fine tuning. I shut her down yesterday before I was 100% where I needed to be because it was getting too late. So you guys can see my machine work here. Notice there's like a little step. Okay, when you're cutting your base, cut it right to the jug. Okay, don't leave a step in there. I have done it where you leave a little step because you shut her down before you kind of get into this protrusion. And what ends up happening when you torque your cylinder down and there's a little step there, it doesn't fit quite right and you'll end up torquing it sideways. Now, you won't know anything's wrong until you go to turn the saw over by hand and it'll feel like the piston's dragging. So just a little thing to mention to you guys. And I've done it before because part of it is I'm blind, friends, is the main thing. I don't see very well, and seeing a 5,000 step in the side of a cylinder base is not something my eyes are capable of anymore. But piston we're running. Last video I did, I had a whole different, whole bunch of pistons. This is the Meteor 394 piston, off the shelf. You can get one of these from Ryan at Wolf Creek. He does have them. I believe they're in the actual Meteor section of his website where it says like other Husqvarnas or the Meteor section. You could probably do a search, but so this is an off-the-shelf Meteor piston, no pop-up. And the reason why I did that is I did cut my base a little bit and I cut my squish band a little bit. So I am going to bump compression up by just cutting the squish band because that makes the combustion chamber smaller. So we did that. And the other thing we're going to do with this, we're going to lighten this piston. We're going to open up the windows and match them to the transfers like we did in the 288. 288 and 394 share a lot of the same parts. They run completely different though. 394 absolutely smokes a 288. They're not, I wouldn't even consider them the same saw. And one of the reasons why I've never really kept the 288 in my saw program is the 394 will cut circles around a 288. They weigh about the same amount and they have, the power difference is incredible. So why not pull out a 394? Yesterday night, I cut my base. I cleaned up the combustion chamber. And now what we got to do, I want to see where my squish is at. And let's just bolt this thing down. I'm just going to grab my bolts here. Let's bolt this cylinder down and measure the squish now with our good calipers. And then we got to retime this saw again. I always put a couple bolts through there. Okay, we got to retime our cylinder because this lowering the cylinder changes the timing numbers. Okay. Now, why would you lower a cylinder even if you don't want more compression? Well, the size of your intake can affect flow. If your intake is too large, the saw can get quite lazy. And you'll hear it once you've built a lot of saws, and those of you that are out there that have built a lot of saws, you can hear it. You can hear a lazy saw from a mile away, and often in the cut they're lazy too, but I like saws that rip. You touch the trigger and they ramp up right now. So if you lowered the cylinder, you can get more intake timing and you haven't made your intake any bigger. So that would be one reason why you would do that. I'm going to grab my solder and my pliers and let's check the squish on this thing. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to check the left side and the right side. You can check the front and back too. Check all four sides if you want. Let's see where we're at here. Okay. Do it a couple times. Grab your calipers right here. Make sure they're zeroed. Again, these are good. Okay. Let's check our squish. 26. 26.5. 27. 27.5. 28. We're between 26 and 28. Now, if you're cutting a squish band, you really want to measure the end here. Okay, 25.5. If you cut a squish band, a lot of times you'll leave a little bit towards the edge of the cylinder. You don't want that because they call that the ring of death. What ends up happening is your bore is consistent through the whole thing, and then you drop your cylinder that little bit and you have a step. Same thing I just showed you on the base. And what ends up happening is you end up with a cylinder that is too small at the top, and guess what happens? You tap your piston on there and your saw goes boom. So just be aware of that. Just trying to show you guys the ins and outs. You don't have to do machine work to make a really good saw. Make sure this thing's zeroed. Okay, we're good. Now the key to this is put the same pressure. 25.5. 26. Now as I go down the squish band, it should get bigger because I didn't cut the squish band straight. So you guys can see Squish appears to be exactly the same. Now, if you measure the front and the back, you should get a little bit larger of a number. Now, if you're running ragged edge of Squish, check all four corners, because if it's too tight, you're going to end up with a squish band. That's off. Okay, you guys can see where front is 25, 25.5. So you guys can see a lot of times when I measure squish, I do front and back, and people say, whoa, 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 you can't do that. The piston moves in the cylinder and you're not getting the right number. Well, I guess, but every time I check, okay, you can see this side's a little bit smaller, a little bit tighter. Now the reason for that is the piston does move, and it's getting bigger as you go, so we're good. Okay, so what do we have? Our squish is 25.5 thousandths consistently across the board. So I will write that down. Now, I wanted 28 thousandths is where I want my squish to be. Well, my assembly silicone is going to add 2 to 3 thousandths of a layer to here when I torque it down. You can torque that down as hard as you want. You'll always have 2 to 3 thousandths with this stuff, okay? So you always have to add that, and you can measure it after, and you'll always get 2 to 3 thousandths. I've measured this stuff over the years. So my squish, if I'm 25 thousandths, 25.5, somewhere around there, I'm going to be at about 28 thousandths, okay? That's exactly where I wanted it. Now, a real machinist could do this in no time. Took me a couple hours to get everything set up and trued and ready to rock and roll. So again, if this is a small saw, I would run it at like 20 thousandths. But because it's a big saw, I'm going to have that extra 8 thousandths squish to make sure that as carbon and as the rod stretches, I don't ever tap it on here. This saw is probably going to get hot because, well, that's how we're building it. I want to make sure that I don't have any issues. Okay, now let's take our piston stop and re-zero our timing wheel, and let's time this thing. Now, with all the machine work I did and lowering it, I dropped this thing about, what did I end up dropping it? 25 thousandths. So we should end up with about 1.5, maybe 2 degrees of timing on this, on the intake and exhaust. Now, the piston moves less in the middle, so we'll probably end up, my guess is, friends, we got 2 degrees on the exhaust, 2 degrees on the intake, and 1 degree on the transfers. The only way to know that, though, is to actually measure it. So let's set this thing up and see where our timing landed. Okay, I'm just eyeballing top dead center. Everything's been moved around, so I know I'm going to have to re-zero it. I'm going to put it at bottom dead center. Screw my timing stop in. Okay. I like to show you guys this stuff because this is the stuff you got to do. I'm seeing 71, so I'll move you guys. Okay, 71 and... oh, we're way off. So 55 and 71, that is 16 degrees. Okay, roughly. I'm horrible at math, friends, so don't beat me up if that's wrong. So if I move this over, if I'm 15, I need 7.5 degrees. So I should be somewhere around, I'm going to go 64 degrees. Okay. 62 degrees. Hope you guys can see this. There's always some parallax where I'm at 61.5. Okay. 64.5. So I'm going to move this to 63. Spin this back around. 63. You guys see that? 63 and 63. Okay. We are zeroed. Okay. Unscrew the timing stop. Let's check the exhaust first and see where we're at. Okay, you guys can see the light coming through there. The exhaust is opened. Okay. Just gonna keep spinning it around. Top dead center should be closed. You guys see it open there? Right about, I'm just gonna cut my hand over there. Right about there. Let's see what the wheel tells us. Wheel's telling me we're right around 105 after top dead center on the exhaust. And without machine work, we are 103 after top dead center. We'll talk about that when we're done this. I'm going to look at the transfers now through the spark plug hole. And I decided to pull out the old Bluetooth scope again. This is what I'm looking for through the spark plug hole. You can see it there. Just move it up and down until you see the transfer opening. And when you figure out exactly where it opens, check out your timing wheel and confirm your timing number. So I'm just moving it up and down until I'm confident that it's in the spot where it opens. And here it is. And here's where our transfers lined up. You guys are seeing, oh no, you guys are seeing what I see, 126 after top dead center. So right now we have the exhaust opens at 105 and our transfers open at 126. So 126 minus 105 is 21 degrees of blowdown. There's definitely, we can do some work on that, no problem. But we're going to get our blowdown by raising the exhaust roof, and then we're also going to open the transfers up, which will take care of some of that extra blowdown. We're going to talk about all this when we finish timing it. Once again, I pulled the scope out just to give you guys a real up close and personal view of what I'm looking for. So I'm moving the piston up, and when I see the skirt clear the bottom of the intake floor, there it is right there. Right as it cracks, you can see there's a little gap in the center there. That's how I measure my timing. We are at 75 degrees before top dead center is where our intake opens, and then it closes at 75 after top dead center. Okay, so I hope that helps you guys understand my thought process, whether it be right or wrong. That's where I'm going with this one. So our squish with no base, and I'm just writing notes here as I talk to you guys. No base after machine work. Now, the reason why you write notes is you might remember what you done to this saw today, tomorrow, the next day, but in 5 years, I guarantee you won't remember. I have a couple of saws on the shelf that I need to put a timing wheel on that run really good. I don't remember what I did with them. So I'm going to put Meteor 394 piston. Okay, Squish Squish is 25.5 thousandths. Okay, exhaust. What did we get for exhaust timing? Exhaust was 105 after top dead center. Transfers. Transfers are 126 degrees after top dead center. Intake. I'm just talking it out as I write it here. Intake is 75 degrees before top dead center, or 150. Now, I always get asked intake duration, why do you do it both ways? Well, I like to know my total opening on my intake. I have hard and fast rules that I can't remember where I put those pieces of paper, but I did that timing cheat sheet about a month or two ago. I think it's called I'm Writing a Porting Book, sort of, that video. I have hard and fast rules about intake timing that I do not surpass in a work saw. In a play saw, I can mess around, but I like saws that spool up quickly. An over intake saw usually will not idle and will be lazy on the trigger. You can hear it and you can see it, friends. It's hard to hide a lazy saw that's been over intake. So, okay, so my timing numbers are, well, my squish is 25.5 thou. I was shooting for 28, 29, 30 with my 2 to 3 thousandths of silicone in there. I'm going to be at 28.5 to, 28.5 to 28. That's exactly where I wanted it. We're not going to split hairs. I'm going to polish my squish band a little bit more. I'll probably take another thou off there, so I'll end up probably at about 29 when we're done. That's perfect. I don't want to top this cylinder because I'm hoping this saw runs for a long time. Even though I'm going to make it on the hotter end of a work saw, and make it fairly nasty, or hope to, I still want to be able to run it in the bush. Because you guys know, I don't build race saws. As much as race saws are fun and neat to see, that's not my cup of tea. So my squish is right where I want it. My exhaust is at 105. Now, my transfers are at 126. So we got 2 degrees of exhaust because my exhaust was at 103 with this piston and cylinder. It's now at 105. My transfers were at 125. They're at 126 now. Again, like I said, you get less movement in the middle of the stroke. And my intake is 75 before top dead center, or 150. It was at 73 and 146. So again, I got 2 degrees on the top, 2 degrees on the bottom, 1 degree in the middle at the transfers. Where am I going to go with this saw? Well, part of me says put it at 100 on the exhaust, but that's not going to be any fun. I think I'm going to go 98 on my exhaust. Now, with a 98 exhaust roof, I'll end up with 28 degrees of blowdown. Do you guys think this saw will run good with 28 degrees of blowdown? I think it will, but I believe in my mind that these transfers, the uppers, are too small. And sorry, friends, it's very windy out and my building's kind of shaking here, but I believe that these transfers are way too small. So I'd like to raise and increase the size of the transfers. If I raise them 2 degrees, which is about, 20 thousandths, I'll end up with, if I go 98 and 124, I'll end up with 26 degrees of blowdown. That leaves me a lot of room to play with the blowdown if I decide the saw needs a little more. But that'll give me a little bit longer blowdown, and I think this saw is going to run good like that. My intake timing, I could push this to 162. Okay, that's 6 degrees of intake timing or 12 degrees of duration. I think I'm going to leave this thing maybe 156, 158. I will have to add 3 degrees of intake timing. Now, the reason why I don't want to go too far, I lowered my cylinder enough that I'm starting at 150 of total duration. That's a really nice place to be. If this was just a regular work saw, I would grind the bottom down 2 degrees, 20 thou, 25 thou, and put it back together, and I would have nasty intake timing with a small intake port. That is very desirable. Now, the reason why I'm going to go high 150s here is I'm going to increase the case capacity by hogging out the lower transfers. Highly contested subject. I've been doing it for years. It seems to work well on Echoes. It seems to work well on McCulloughs, Home Lights, 266 Huskies, 372s. I like that. It seems to keep the power where I want it, which is at the top. And with a sharp chain and a fast saw, feeding it all that extra fuel that you do when you got a long blowdown, hogged out lower transfer saw, it suits my purposes. So I'm going to do that with this. And again, 98, this thing's going to be a screamer. Should be capable of pretty decent RPM for a saw this size. So that's where we're going with this. Again, friends, I don't even know if this saw is going to run. We will cross that bridge when we get to it. I will be putting a pipe on this saw. I think I'm going to reach out to Buckin and see if he can show me the original claw pipe that's on his 394. That saw is nutso. And my favorite cutting video ever, Buckin put a 24-inch Canon with the roller nose. He put that on his 394, and he had a big job that he had a ton of wood to buck, and the whole video is just him murdering wood with that 394 and a short bar. So it's been my life's goal to have a saw like that. So I don't know if I can roll with the bear claw, but hopefully my saw will be close to that, and I'll be happy. So anyhow, friends, thanks for hanging out, and hope you guys are as excited as I am about a 394 project. This one's been in the making for years. I'm going to try and go through a lot of these projects that have been sitting and see where I'm at with them and get back on the horse. Having a baby kind of threw off my projects, and for the better. I'm super glad we had a child, but things are starting to level out now. We're starting to get into a routine, and hopefully I can get back on the bench and do more grinding. So stay tuned. There's a couple of odds and ends I need to figure out with this saw that I think we'll do in a video, and then we can get into port work, lightening the piston, and making this thing rip. And then we got to put it together with a big box of parts. I've never had this saw in one piece, so I have absolutely no idea what goes where. That'll be fun too. Anyhow, thanks for watching. Take her easy. See you guys in a couple days.